Hey, friend. Today we are interviewing really one of my heroes in the faith. A guy named Jamie Winship and his wife Donna are joining us, and we're talking about a lot of different things. But I think the main topic, if I had to summarize it, is how to end fear in our finances. Because the truth is, so many of us, if we're honest, fear affects how we make decisions in our financial lives. And honestly, so many people are so paralyzed and I think being held back from the potential that God has for them because of fear in their finances. And so I was really excited to talk about Jamie, who wrote a book called Living Fearless. And when you get to know him and you get to know his story, like he's just such an amazing, remarkable guy, that it was exciting to talk to him about that in the context of our finances and how do we tear down fear out of our finances and really begin to live free. So I love this interview. It was a joy for me to get to do. I hope it blesses you just as much as it did me and Linda. But with that, let's get to it. Jamie is one of my favorite authors, I would say. One of the more challenging people that I've ever read or listened to in terms of just helping me break down some of my limiting beliefs and mindsets that have maybe held me back. Yeah. And so we're thrilled to get to chat with them today. And there's a whole lot more I can say. And Jamie, I think the way he describes himself is as a militant peacemaker, which is a great thing that we'll kind of get into and unpack a little bit. But he's just got a really interesting history where he's worked as a police officer and he's worked in a lot of really hostile environments and has just amazing story after amazing story, and has one of the most fascinating lives that I think I've ever heard of anyone. So we'll get into all that. But Jamie, Donna, thank you for coming to hang out and chat today.
Thanks for having us on.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, I think what I want to start with is, so this is kind of an unconventional start, but I want to tell you about something that we figured out recently, which is going to lead to a question that ultimately I'd love for you to comment on. So, one of the things that we're passionate about, here at SeedTime is helping Christians be in a position to be able to give more, and some of that is increasing their financial means, but some of that is increasing their boldness and generosity. Okay. And so we did a little research and digging on this, someone on our team actually, and we're just brainstorming, asking some really big questions here of how much money would it cost to solve world hunger? Let's just throw that out there and figure it out. Okay. So it turns out you can do some research on this. And I think it's about $40 billion. According to the UN, they said it's $40 billion per year to, quote, solve world hunger. Now, you and I both know this is more complicated than just throwing money at it. But as a thought exercise here, let's start with that, okay? And so then if you divide that up by the number of Christian households in the United States, there's 83 million. So what that means is that to solve world hunger, the average Christian household only needs to give $480 more per year, or less than 1% of their average household income. Wow. So what that means is the American church, simply by having every Christian household give 1% more of their income per year, has the potential to solve world hunger. Okay. So starting with that there, my question out of all of this is, when I look at American Christians, and I'm saying this because we've lived this, we've been in this, but one of the most recurring things that I see financially, why so many Christians, the average Christian only gives 2.5%, is I don't think it's primarily greed. I think it's primarily fear. And it's, as you talk about this idea of self-preservation, and I got to hoard, I got to keep myself safe.
Self-promotion, right?
Yeah. And so the question out of all of this is, if you were tasked with helping, a Western Christian remove this fear from their finances, and we'll extend beyond just giving, but removing fear from their finances, where would you start?
Yeah. I mean, that's
great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's the kind of question we should be asking every day. It sounds like a really huge, complicated question. And it's really not. And I just happen to be writing on this topic right now. So I'll give you another example and I'll come right back to it. So, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, a woman called me. We were living in Seattle at the time, and a woman calls me, connected to me by another person. And this is what she says. She says, I have unlimited funding. I have unlimited funding. And what I want to do is I want to do something to battle human trafficking. The reason she was motivated to do that, she told me, was because she had been incredibly successful in her career. Her and her husband, they were getting ready to retire, and she was having nightmares about a girl in a cage. So they, built the dream house, all that stuff, and then she's ready. They're done with everything, but she's having these reoccurring nightmares. So she feels like God is inviting her into doing something to fight trafficking. So the first thing she does is she calls a lot of different nonprofits and says to each one of them, I will take care of your budget, whatever it is. All I'm asking is that all of the nonprofits, if you would work together, I'll fund all of you.
For trafficking,
yeah, to battle human trafficking, I'll fund all of you. And the answer from the nonprofits is, we don't want to work with any other groups.
Oh,
wow.
Right? This is common. And so then the question you have to, and she was very frustrated and shocked by that. I wasn't surprised at all by that. But so the question you have to ask is, okay, so if a nonprofit has a person that's saying, we'll take care of all of your budgeting for an indefinite amount of time, you just have to work with other nonprofits in the same field.
Right.
And these are all Christian organizations, and their answer is, we don't want to work together. You have to ask, why not? Why don't you want to work together? And then what you get is self-protection and self-promotion of their nonprofit, right? So she's frustrated. So she's asking around, like, is there another way we can think about battling human trafficking? And I think, just from reading your all's background on finances and all, the question is, like, there's a certain route you can just go down that everybody goes down. You don't need any creativity, and you don't need the Holy Spirit to go down that road. It's like going to war. Nobody has to pray and get wisdom to go to war. It's just what you do if you don't have any other options. This doesn't take any creativity. If you're going to try and avoid war, now you're going to have to employ creativity at a very high level. And it's a lot of work. So she calls around and she gets connected to me, and she's telling me this story. And I said, well, I work in law enforcement for a long time, and we've worked at the State Department level. Nobody works together. Nobody. Government agencies don't work together because we're competing for funding. We're competing for prestige. We're competing for power. So we'll work together but you have careers involved. In my career, and so it's interesting. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to, you keep running into this same issue, which is self-protection and self-promotion, not only at the individual level, at the agency level, and at the city level, and at the country level. But it starts right here, right in the human heart. So she's asked me, she says, if you had unlimited funding, what would you do to battle human trafficking that's different than what's being done? Because what's being done doesn't stop it. Right? We all have to agree. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's basically not even slowed it down, because what we're doing is just following traffickers around and picking up what they leave behind. That's basically, we're not ahead of it in any way. So, so she asked me, what would you do? And I said, well, I think probably what I would do is try and win the traffickers.
Yeah.
Like that would be because if you win the traffickers, they'll stop it. They'll shut it down.
Yeah.
It's like when you're fighting terrorism, the way you shut down terrorism is shut down the ability to recruit new people. Because if you go in to recruit new people and they say, we don't want to be recruited, it ends, it stops. So how do you do that? You can't kill all the recruiters, right? You can't arrest every trafficker. We've been trying that for a zillion years. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. So I said to her, let me pray about it. But before I do, I don't know who you are I know who you are, but I don't know who you are what does God call you? What's your identity in the kingdom of God? Do you know that? And she said, I don't know what you mean. I said, okay, so then I don't know who I'm talking to because you don't know who I'm talking to. So would you do me a favor? And here's a process. Go through this process. When you understand your own identity in the kingdom, call me, tell me what your identity is, and I'll tell you whether our identities work together, right? She's like, you don't just want the funding? That's like how people you just want the funding. And like the funding's not, money doesn't heal people. Jesus heals people.
Yeah.
Right. And Jesus doesn't fix people, he heals people. So the money's not the question, clearly. So she prays and then she calls me back weeping and she says, I'm the woman in the cage. And I said, yeah, I thought so.
Oh, wow.
You that's in the cage. So I said, when you come out of the cage, then you and I can do something together. So let's figure out how you come out of the cage. See, people think it's always somebody else. It's you. You're get the log out of your own lie. So she works through that, beautiful. And then she says to me, okay, what can we do? And I said, let's figure out how to win the trafficker. And so we've been working on this for a number of years, but so called a bunch of people I know, in all different federal agencies, law enforcement, every high level, all the way down to local, got a select group together. I told everyone, you can only come in your true identity. You can't come representing an agency, an organization. You have to come only in your true identity. Leave your vocation at the door. We don't care.
But bring all your wisdom that you've gained.
Yeah, but all of your knowledge from your vocation, right? But if you say the name of your vocation or who your position, you create separation in the room, which fragments the room. And Americans especially only know how to fragment rooms when they introduce themselves. They don't know how to reconcile a room by introducing themselves because we're trained to separate. That's what we're trained how to do.
Wow.
So we only know how to put people in groups and identify groups. We don't know how to reconcile. That just comes out. And so when I stand up and say, I have 35 experience with the CIA, every FBI guy in the room's backed off of me. He's like, I ain't working with this guy. Like because I just named the team I'm on, right? And that's what we love doing is identifying what team we play for, and we want to know what team the other person's on. As soon as you do that, you've split your team into fragments. And we do it every single day, all day long. And so even when we call traffickers, we've dehumanized and we fragmented. They're human beings that are doing something that broken people do. But if they're traffickers, we hate them. I mean, we just hate them because they're not my brother. They're not my brother. And I'm not responsible for someone that's not my brother. Anyway, so we all work together. We pray together in our true identities. And we come up with a workable plan, believe it or not, to stop trafficking. Humans are co-creators with God. How can you not come up with a solution to a problem? The question is, when you ask for wisdom, are you going to do what the wisdom says? And here's the wisdom. If you love those traffickers, you can stop them. And so the debate wasn't what to do. It was whether or not to love traffickers. Do you see? It's like, wait, money's not the issue. If it only takes that amount of money to feed the world, why don't we do it? Because, and this is my whole point, we are raised in a separation worldview 24/7, every day of our life, not just us, everyone in the world. Communists, atheists, gay, straight, evangelicals, all raised in the same worldview, a separation worldview. That's number one pillar is scarcity. Yeah. It's number one pillar scarcity, not how much money you have. It's the whole concept that in the world, there's not enough. There's just not enough. And once you believe there's not enough, you're going to war at some level because you have to protect your own. You have to. And so to protect your own becomes wisdom. It becomes the wisest thing you could do is protect your own. But when we read the scriptures, it's the opposite that's true. And Jesus says, if you seek to save your own life, you're going to lose it. We don't believe this. We do not believe this. We have to protect our own first. Listen to anyone talk, any party, any group. It's like that other party's going to kill you. We got to get rid of them. We got to shut them down. We got to make them illegal so that we win. Why? Because there's not enough for all of us, right? And in that thinking style, it's a measurement system, right? It becomes a measurement system because now, like, well, when's it? Well, do we have enough? I don't know. What's the measurement of it? But worse, it's like, am I enough? Because you can't live in that system without looking in the mirror going, wait a minute, am I enough? And the answer is no, you're not. How do you know? Because I compare myself to these other arbitrary standards.
Yeah.
And middle schoolers are checking out of this system. They don't want to be in it. And the suicide rate goes. It's like, we don't want to be in this. And Aristotle said it, if you live in a system where the measurable is more important than the immeasurable, you're going to be a society of barbarians. Because
Wow.
everything's a competition and a measurement. And so, yeah, we have enough to feed the world, but we can't, because what if we don't have enough? It's the feeding of the 5,000, right? It's the disciples saying, hey, we love these people. They're great, but we don't have enough to take care of them. So send them away, separate. And Jesus is like, bad plan. But that's our plan. That's how we think. We don't have enough for everyone. Shut it down. Why? Because we might run out. Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, we call it scarcity thinking, leads to pursuit of certainty. It leads to pursuit of perfectionism. It leads to extremism. But one thing it definitely leads to is conflict, right? Is conflict. So even when we look at the Middle East, where we worked for a lot of years, in the Middle East, there's this mentality. There's not enough land every single day. There's not enough land for me and you. There's not enough
water.
And because of that, God gives me permission to kill you. Every side says it. Every side, and they justify it with God. Every side. How can you kill this many people? Because it's our land and you're on our land. And God gave us permission. But they're like, what Bible are you reading? Where are you getting this? But that's what it is. It's a scarcity worldview. And so I assume every person I'm talking to right off the bat is operating in a separation worldview with a scarcity mentality. Even if they're wealthy people, that doesn't take away a scarcity mentality. You guys know
100%. Yeah.
Because a ton of money doesn't make me think that I'm enough.
Yeah.
And so once a person understands that you intrinsically are enough and have inherent value apart from what you produce for the marketplace, they're free. They're free to become who they really are. And so that's the starting point. And so the fear is in every human, there's not enough and I'm not good enough. And in this world, I mean, who's going to make me a good Christian dad? Who's what is it? What's the definition? I read this book. I'm nothing like this person, but I'm supposed to be like this person because they wrote a book.
Comparison.
And I'm gonna be like that, and my kids don't fit. My kids are different than the book, and so I'm not enough. I'm failing as a Christian dad, according to the Christian dad definition.
That's really good.
When you read the scriptures, there is no Christian dad. It's not there. It's love God, love your neighbor in the same way that you love yourself. Everything comes under that. Everything comes under that. But for us, it's this measurement system, and you're born into it and you're taught it so young, you don't really know how to think outside of it. You just, and I tell people all the time, it's like, in the separation worldview, it's not what economic system you're in, it's the separation worldview. So a communist in the separation worldview is brutal. A capitalist in a separation worldview is brutal. A socialist in a separation worldview is brutal. In a connection worldview that Genesis is presenting, that we're interconnected, that if one part dies, all parts die. We're a body. If the hand doesn't work, you're in trouble. And the hand's not, like, that's what the Bible keeps trying to tell us. You're a body. The whole thing's connected. The universe is connected. And if you move the wolves out of Yellowstone, the fish are going to die. Whether you like it or not, they're going to die. Put them back, because that's the connection, and that's the way it works. When you violate that thinking and think, you know what, this part of the city is a bunch of trouble, let's just close it off, let's just ignore that part of the city and everyone move over here, we're going to be fine. You're living in a lie. It's a lie right in the face of the God who made a connected universe and said, you need to love your enemy. You need to love your enemy, right? And so then if you have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, you can feed the whole crowd. You don't need all that money.
And I think an answer to your question too, in light of what Jamie's saying, is it's not that people don't have the money, it's that they don't trust the people they give the money to, right? Because we just keep doing the same thing that doesn't work. We keep donating the money to organizations that then goes to different countries that have corrupt governments, and they hoard the money because they're in the separation worldview. And if we were fully connected to God and each other in our true identities, we could collaborate and create together and find solutions to these problems. But we just keep doing the same old thing that doesn't work, the same old, just repeating the same old patterns. Romans 12:2, stop conforming to the same old patterns of your little world that aren't working, but be transformed. And we don't enter into that process. So it boils down to fear. We're afraid to give the money because we know it's not going to work. So why should I give my money? I'd rather put it in my kids' college fund.
And we know that the solution to fear is perfect love, which is hilarious. So when you have a room full of law enforcement people and you say, our whole system's built on fear, everything we're doing is built on fear. What if we built it on love? What would the CIA look like? What would the FBI look like? What if we were servers and protectors, like today, instead of just law enforcers? Law enforcers are the Pharisees. Jesus is a server and protector. Who's going to transform the world? The server and protector. But we constantly go back to the law enforcer because they make us think we have control and power.
And the people that are passionate about these issues, from our own experience of when Jamie was a police officer, when we were living overseas, it's like thinking with God. We have the mind of Christ. How can we do this a different way? And that started with Jamie, and some of the stories are in his book and, various things on YouTube or whatever. But it's like, how can I police there has to be a different way that's redemptive. And not just arresting people who go through the system and get out and get arrested again. And these problems never go away. But how can I do it a different way? How can we think with God, with each other? What's a different way to feed the world? And I don't know of anybody that's really asking those questions. I hope they're out there.
Yeah, I mean,
well, I was just thinking, it's funny that you shared the story about the trafficking, because that was something that honestly we didn't really know much about until, I don't know, 5 or so years ago. And I heard about it, and someone who has an organization was telling a story of a girl in a cage. And I just sat down and bawled my eyes out. I mean, it was uncontrollable. I was like, I don't even know how she can finish her sentence, because it was so overwhelming to me. And after I heard this, I'm like, well, I have to pray because I don't know how to solve this problem. And the Lord brought that up to me as like, the way to change the situation is to pray for the traffickers. Right. And pray for those people who are honestly bound up in this sin pattern. It's not just the people who are being trafficked, because yes, you can rescue those. And I'm so grateful for people who have been rescued.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, one goes out and one comes in, And so it's like, there's only that way to stop it. And Bible says they'll know us by our love. Right. And if we are not, I think that's just such a good way to look at it that I really don't think many people are.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is how powerful the lie operates in our world. What the lie keeps telling us, you're never going to beat this. I mean, you're just going to have this forever. And all the believers sit around going, yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, why would we just agree with that? But all of us do it. So when we came up with this idea, with all these different people, is like, it's a workable idea. It's like what you guys are saying, you can be $40,000, $50,000 in debt, but you don't just go, well, that's the way it's going to be forever. And if that's what you say, then you're going to be in it forever. But if you say, you know what, today we're going to go a different way and we're going to do what we can in one day. If we did that with everything, that's how it works. And you just disciple out of it. And so we did that. And then I called we decided, we picked a place overseas to experiment because it has to work in real life. Mm-hmm. And I called our law enforcement people in that country. And I said, hey, this is what we're going to do. I just want to give you a heads up, just so you know we're there, just so we don't step on any toes. And the director in that country, he's a believer. He said, you guys are insane. This is not going to work. And I said,
music to your ears.
Yeah. And he said, these people are animals, all that kind of thing. And what was interesting is our team that was praying and trying to figure out a solution, we wrestled more with loving our enemies. Was the biggest obstacle for God to give us a solution was our hatred for the other people. Like, we're asking him, tell us what to do. And he's like, you don't love them. It doesn't matter what I tell you. If you don't love them, it's going to be, you can have the tongues of angels and the tongues of men and all knowledge and sacrifice yourself. If it's not sourced of love, it's a waste of time and an irritant. We don't believe that either. I mean, it's funny, the things that we just don't believe.
Yeah.
But so we wrestled and guys cried and they're like, do you know what we've seen these guys do? And then at the end, when we said, this is a workable strategy, we're going to ask the Lord to give us the heart to do it. Then the lead guy, who happened to be a CIA guy, he said, okay, the final question is, are we willing to die for these people? Because some of us in this room are going to get killed doing this, because this is a vicious world. We not only have to say we're willing to love them, we have to be willing to die for them.
Wow.
And we went one by one around the room and everyone had to say, I'm in. Right. Wow. And it's very private and, not no one knows about it, but like, we know each other and we're like, are we saying to each other, we're going to go into this thing and we're willing to die there for traffickers? And that was also very emotional. And God says, okay, now you're ready to hear the solution.
Wow.
If you're going to ask me, don't bounce around in doubt, right, for wisdom. And so when I was telling the director in that country, he's the same thing. He's like, you guys are nuts. It's not going to work. They're going to kill you guys. I said to him, do you believe the Bible? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you know Saul of Tarsus? Do you know what that guy was doing before someone went to be with him? Like, do you not believe that story? And then he said, okay, he goes, all right, well, there's some occasions, but it's not what believers really think will happen in the world. It's not, we're not really truthful about that. So anyway, so we put it into play, and we've had our people on the ground, and nobody that's on the ground is law enforcement. None of them. They're average people that are the team, and they are more effective. They have, in less than a year, they are inside of two of the biggest rings in the country and they are at the top, talking to the top level leaders. And those leaders are already releasing their people out to these guys. And do you know what? Here's what did it. They were walking around the city where we were targeting. And the lead guy of the team, he's no law enforcement background at all. He's walking around and he knows where he wants to target and what group he wants to get inside of. And he's terrified of them. I mean, they're like some bad people. And he's asking God, what's the way in? What's the way in? What's the way in? And the Lord says to him one day, this guy's from a small town in the South. And the Lord said, what would you do if a person moved into your town that you didn't know? What would be your way in with them? And the guy says back to God, me and my wife would bake them chocolate chip cookies and take it over. And the Lord's like, well, so what he does is him and his wife bake chocolate chip cookies, and at night, they go into the place where they're bringing the girls and selling, and they hand out chocolate chip cookies to all the bouncers. And that's what breaks it open. That does. And the Lord said to him, they're not traffickers. They're your neighbor. Stop calling them traffickers. They're your neighbor. It's what Jesus said when they said, well, who's our neighbor? And he tells the story of the Samaritan. Don't call them traffickers. They're your neighbor. What would you do for your neighbor? And we're making a documentary about what's happened. It's so amazing what they're doing. And they've also recommended girls to these guys, to our people. Like they're sending girls out to them saying, help these girls, help them.
Wow.
Every trafficker they've interviewed, do you know why they're in there? Economics, scarcity economics. That's why they're in it. The same reason in our documentary, we interview CEOs of companies and law enforcement and women survivors and traffickers. And if we don't put underneath which they are, you can't tell the difference between any of them by the way they talk about scarcity worldview. They're all like, yeah, I'm in a job. I hate it. The trafficker says the same thing. So does the employee at Google. I hate it. Well, why don't you leave it? What am I going to do? I gotta pay for this. I gotta pay for that. I don't love my job. I hate it, but I'm just going to try and endure it. That's exactly what even some of the women said. Oh, we hate it, but do you know how much money we make? Like you wouldn't know. It's not an employee at some company.
Yeah.
So because we're in an economic separation worldview that's built on scarcity, it's like if I leave this, there's nothing else for me. That's how people talk about. That's how cops talk about their job when they're frustrated, they're cynical. Do it a different way. I can't. Why not? Because I'll get fired. So get fired. I can't get fired because what am I going to do? See, the scarcity just traps us in a certain way of thinking.
Well, and it's really not believing that God is who he says he is, because his name that he gave us to, know him by is
one of his identities.
Provider.
Yes.
And it is interesting. Do we actually believe that?
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest questions for the church as a whole is, do we actually believe what he told us?
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so it says, that's why it says faith is the substance of the things we hope for. Do we hope human trafficking ends? I don't think people do. I mean, I don't think they even think about it. Faith is the substance of the things you hope for. It's the evidence of things not seen yet. Like that's what it is. It's like, you don't have to have like, I'm convinced God's going to stop it. We just hope for it. And we don't see it yet, but we're going to move towards it. And it says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. Not because you have to have all the faith in the world. It's because the hope and the belief in things not yet seen and things you hope for moves you in a direction where God will show you things that'll blow your mind. And without that kind of movement, you're not going to please him, because he's like, come this way and stop accepting the situation as you see it. Stop telling me this can't change. Trust me, come with me. And to do that, we have to risk. We have to take risks. And we're taught that's not smart. That's not good stewardship.
And we have to learn to hear from God and let that voice inform our decisions, not the fear, like you're talking about Jehovah Jireh, God, our provider. We all have memories of times in our life where we felt like we weren't provided for. Yet here we are, and we're sleeping in a bed, and we have a car, and we have clothes.
Yeah.
And we let that memory inform our present situation. And so then you're making decisions based in fear. And like Jamie said, scarcity, rather than tuning in to how God's speaking to you. Because in this present moment, you have abundant and generous grace to do the things that he's asking you to partner with, what he's inviting you into.
Yeah.
And so we get regret from the past and fear of the future. And so we get stuck. Right?
Okay.
I just want to ask really fast, on a real practical level, we have 3 kids, they're 5, 7, and 10. And I would love to hear how you brought these ideas into raising your kids.
Yeah. So we were around 40 years old with middle school and elementary. We have 3 boys, age kids, when we kind of made a huge paradigm shift from what I would say was a transactional religious beliefs around Christianity into more of a transformational relationship with God and his kingdom. And our kids watched it happen in us. We weren't like talking about it at night after they went to bed, or at the time we were working at an international school in Indonesia, and we were kind of going through this paradigm shift with several other families. And we just talked about it all the time, and we were real open about it. Instead of sitting down and like saying, okay, we're going to pray now and listen to God. I mean, if you say that to an 8-year-old boy, 99% of the time, it's not going to work. Right. And then we're like,
18-year-old boy.
Then we're like, God's not speaking to my kid, pray for me, or I'm under attack. No, 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 no. You just got to understand the bent of your child.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would just talk about our experiences all the time. And instead of saying, now we're going to pray, they would be talking about an issue or a problem or a relationship conflict, and just always say, this is the prayer that changed our lives. God, what do you want me to know? And so they're talking about, a memory's coming to my mind right now of our son struggling in math and failing a test and feeling like a failure. Okay, you feel like a failure right now. What does God want you to know about that? We just talk about it naturally and not make it like this big spiritual event. Didn't always work. It's trial and error. It's not this exact science. It's part of the mystery of the connected worldview, being connected to God. It's a big mystery. That doesn't mean we can't know it. It means there's this endless process of discovering who God is, who we are, how he communicates with us. And so, my biggest advice is just be real open about your own process and with your kids, instead of like at night. I just did this not too long ago with my granddaughter. Instead of when you put him to bed, okay, let's say our prayers. Dear God, bless mommy, bless daddy, going through that thing. Just lay in bed and say, think about your day to day. Where was God showing you love and you didn't realize it? How is God communicating love to you? Through a friend, through something you did on the playground, through your teacher praising you, through seeing a butterfly. It doesn't matter, because he communicates to us with all of those things. And so it's opening up their mind to learn how to receive that communication and not make it some special spiritual event. We're making this, my goal was to make the supernatural a natural part of their day.
Yeah.
The supernatural becomes natural, you go up to the next level. Then there's another level of supernatural that becomes natural, and you're just always ascending with God. And so that's, I would say just make it normal and talk about it normally, and just do it and not say, now we're going to have family devotion,
Which never worked for us.
Which never worked for us.
Whenever I would say we're having family
Us
devotion,
either.
we would have a mutiny. It was an automatic mutiny. So, another little piece of that is teaching them how to use negative emotion. Negative emotion is very valuable. It's not from the enemy and all that stuff. But when they would have negative emotion, like fear, like anger, like guilt, like shame, these kinds of things, addressing it immediately. How does that make you feel? It makes me feel stupid. And everything you want to counter is an identity statement they make about themselves. That's the danger. Not that they failed. You're going to fail. It's that I'm a failure. That's where the lie takes root.
No, just because you failed a test, that doesn't make you a failure. What does God want you? What does God want you to know about that? What does God want you to know about your teacher?
Yeah.
And God says really practical things to him, like go to bed earlier, study harder. Like it's really beautiful. Only it's not me doing it to him. It's like the Lord's telling me that I'm smart. Right. Okay. So what does that mean? What's a smart person do in a situation like this? And then they get creative. This creativity comes out. Well, maybe I could, like that one, our son said, well, maybe I could get a tutor. And he goes and gets his tutor, but then he invites everyone in his class to the tutor and starts a Bible study with it. So the F turns into this beautiful thing. And so that they know failure leads to creativity. Yes, that's the value.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I love that.
That's so good. I want to talk about the rational mind versus the intuitive mind. And I love how you break this down and break it out. And again, particularly how that connects to fear.
This might have been the first video I think we watched of yours.
Because I remember hearing you talk about this, and I think this is something that so many people, this framework of thinking about your thoughts and kind of categorizing them, I just found to be so liberating. Yeah. And so anyway, I would love for you to just kind of share a little bit on that, and specifically how it relates to fear and, in the context of finances for a lot of us.
Yeah. No, that because you know the Lord talks about this a lot, because money is becomes such a big deal, right? And it's such a big
Yeah.
part of our culture. Um, it's like when you're in the scarcity mindset, when I'm doing this anywhere, whether it's at the university or for some reason I've been invited to these financial advisor groups lately. But when we talk about scarcity, when I say to people, like, what is there not enough of in your life? First thing they say is time, right? The second thing they'll say is money, and then peace and love and all that. But when they say time, and I'm like, so time has no power. It doesn't have any power. Do you know what it is when you create something that has no power and give it power and then you bow down to it? It's called idolatry. And so we have a room full of idolaters who are sold out followers of Jesus and complete idolaters to time, because time is more powerful in our life than the Spirit of God. We got to flip that back around. Money's the same thing. You know, money doesn't have any power. It's because we make it powerful and then we bow down to it.
Yeah.
So the intuitive mind, the beauty of the intuitive mind is it raises above that, right? It goes above this world that we've been taught. We're taught scarcity, like I said, all the time, and that separation is normal and good. And so rationally, it makes sense to us because it's just there. It is like that guy has more money than you. He's more powerful than you. He's better than you. Like that's the way it is. So in the rational mind, you can't really escape it. So what Jesus is doing, and any parent can do this, and this is how you disciple a kid. You want to teach them to live in the prefrontal cortex, not in the amygdala, which is where they're taught to live in their amygdala, their fear brain, self-protect, self-promote, fight, flight, or freeze. Like that's how we evaluate every situation. That's valuable at some point, but it has to be overridden all the time, right? That's what love does. It overrides the fear. So you don't get stuck in that assessment center. So that when something looks threatening, you can stop and go, like, wait a second. Why am I afraid of this? Like you can take every thought captive and hold that amygdala thought, and you can move it forward into the prefrontal cortex, which is where faith and vision and dreams and creativity all happen in the prefrontal cortex. And so the way Jesus does it with people, that's why he's always going, see that bird over there? You see that field over there? There was once a woman who that's how he moves them right up into the imagination really quick to bypass the fear they've been taught every day of their life, that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not going to make it. And so he moves them up. And so when I say to a person, okay, first of all, before we talk about that, I want you to just imagine you're in your favorite place. Boom, they're in the intuitive mind. Up there is where you hear God. That's where, and Jesus never moves out of the prefrontal cortex as a human. He never leaves it. And the disciples are going up and down all the time like that. And so the intuitive mind is, as Einstein said, it's the master, and the rational mind is the servant that works it out. So you want to live in the intuitive and keep pulling it down in the rational and doing it, right? So it's an elevator in your brain that starts in the amygdala and goes up through the singular cortex all the way up to the prefrontal cortex, where you dream and hear and, wow, what if we did this different? And what if we police different? And what if we handle trafficking differently? It's way up here in the faith dream world. And then you see this workable plan, like Mozart could see a symphony. And then you got to pull it all the way down and write down the notes for the clarinet player.
Yeah.
Then you got to write it down so men and women can read it and move with it. Otherwise, it's just this bizarre. And so it's this beautiful exercise, but you have to let the intuitive mind be the master. So that's what prayer and contemplation is. I said this to some school principals the other day, public school. I said, no human innovation occurs without contemplation. And I always tell people, this isn't Christianity. This is truth. Jesus isn't preaching Christianity. He's preaching what's true versus what's false. Here's what's true in a human. A human can't truly innovate without contemplation first. So if you want a classroom full of innovators, which we all want, teach them how to contemplate. Which one of you know how to contemplate? None of you. So let me teach you how to contemplate. And see, then it makes sense to them. Like, oh, I'm like, you show me a inventor, anyone that's radically changed a paradigm in any field. They're serious contemplators in that vocation. Serious. Not guys that just made things faster and cheaper. Not that. This is innovators that are like, you know what? I think Newtonian physics is kind of right, but wrong. Like that level thinker, right? Here's what we need in the US. This is what we need. You know what? I think the education system needs to be completely transformed. Who's thinking about that? That's what the criminal justice system needs to be transformed. The economic system needs to be transformed. The healthcare system needs to be transformed. The governance system of our country needs to be transformed.
How we started talking about food, the distribution of goods needs to be transformed. It's just compulsive repetition that fails every time.
Because every time we get to a situation, we react in fear and you fight.
And fear shuts down the creativity. Right. You can't receive if you're stuck.
So young, you can start teaching kids how to move, recognize the fear, move all the way up into the intuitive, and then bring it down because it's got to work in the rational. It has to, right? So we can fast and pray and lay on our faces with a bunch of law enforcement people for 2 days, come up with a plan, but rationally, then we got to be able to go do it in another country. And it's such a beautiful process. It's so beautiful, but we can't like get up into it. Right. And prayer meetings don't do it. Prayer meetings they're not creative, contemplative things where you're asking God, like in Acts, when they say, God, when they're threatened with persecution, they say, Lord, you consider their threats. You consider their threats and tell us what to do. It's like there's a knowing. David says, take me to the rock that is higher than me. Take me to the rock that is higher than me because I don't know what to do in this situation. And confession, as I say in the book, is truth-telling. And if you don't start with truth-telling, you're never going to get anywhere. Here's the truth. We don't know what to do in this situation, Lord. Tell us, give us wisdom. We don't know how to make our schools better. We don't know how to make our schools safer. All we can think of is make them like fortresses and arm the teachers. That's the only thing we can come up with. Right? You don't have to pray to come up with that. Anyone can come up with that. What you want to come up with is how do we create a society that this doesn't happen in?
Yeah.
So that's the intuitive. And it's a discipline, it's a practice.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, well, let me ask you this in terms of, because, based on that, it seems to me that far too many Christians operate in the rational mind with their finances. And again, we've spent plenty of our times making decisions from a rational self-preservation mode. Like we fully understand that, but by God's grace, he's allowed us to tap into some of those intuitive thoughts and ideas that we've taken action on. And then we've seen just tremendous miracles as a result. And I think that is the big opportunity for so much of the church is to be able to step into that. And so I guess my question out of that is, how does that connect with, I assume there's a connection here, but how does that connect with us discovering our identity, which is, what you guys talk about in the book, what you talk about in your classes and everything else like that?
Identity is discovering your true identity is life-changing because at the deepest level, the purpose, which is stated in Isaiah 43:1, the second half of that verse says, I have called you by your name, so you will know that you are mine. And the purpose of understanding your identity is to understand the deep, unbreakable, solid connection that you have in relationship with the triune God. Like he's never mad at you. He's never disappointed in you. He's not giving you responsibility. He doesn't have expectations of you that you're afraid you're going to fail or let him down. It's just like a newborn baby. Who holds their newborn baby and doesn't just utterly love them with zero expectations, right? And then you make eye contact and you have this connection and the baby starts to feel secure and starts to relate to you. Some psychologists call that the pathway of joy. because that's the entire purpose of human existence, is joyful attachment. And when you have that to God and understand the identity that he's created in you while you were still in your mother's womb, that it's actually a part of his likeness and image that he's put in you, just like your child knows its blood connection to you. Even in adoption, I mean, the child knows that connection to the parent and that unconditional love. And when you have that and recognize that it's unshakable, you're fearless, you're feeler. Then you can believe, then as you start to live it out, you can believe all these promises. I've given you everything you need for life and godliness. I've given you every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms. Wow, nothing, no created thing, no uncreated thing can ever separate me from the love of God. And so this is a little bit of a soapbox for me, because people want to hear their identity so they know what to do in life. And it's not about doing, it's about being. And when you understand who you are, your being then informs what you do. But we let our doing inform our being. And so then when we lose our job, we go bankrupt, or we fail at something, then we don't know who we are. We've lost who we are, and we're utterly miserable and alone and feel separated. But when we work on intentionally being with God in our true identity, hearing from him daily about it, connecting with him minute by minute, realizing you have the mind of Christ, he's communicating to you every second, then that informs everything you do, because that's why Jamie's book is called Living Fearless. You can really live fearlessly in your true identity when you understand that.
And bring it to your vocation, whatever the vocation, right? And what's cool about you guys is I'm pretty sure, you know, if we had a long time to talk together, that although our identities are gift to the world, like our identities are gift to the world. And so your identities, both individually and the identity that you form together, which is another identity, right? So a hand is a hand, but when it's connected to an arm, the identity is body. It's like part of the thing. And so your identities, although they're demonstrated out in the vocation of, you know, giving financial leadership and advice and freedom, just like mine was demonstrated out in law enforcement and all that stuff, and Donna's in teaching. But my identity my deep down identity is untire of knots. I'm an untire of knots. So if I go back to the police department or the State Department and ask them, why was I successful? That's what they would say. In some form, they would go, because you could resolve conflict at a level most people couldn't. Like, that's my gift to the world. I can do that as a police officer and be really good. I could also do it working at Walmart. Like, the vocation didn't make any difference. So your identities, whatever you guys were in, I think would end up in freedom for people in whatever situation they're in. It's just that in the vocation that it's expressing itself now, it's financially. But when God rewards and honors people, he doesn't honor them with cash. He honors them with greater influence and authority. That's how he does it. So whatever the vocation, like, so for yours, it would make sense as you are connected to God in the truth of who you are in your vocation, as he honors your identity being a gift to the world, you become more influential and have greater authority in that vocation, just like I did in the police department and Donna in the educational system. And that's beautiful to watch in a person. One other thing I'll say about that, I was with these guys that are experts in leadership development. And and I was asking them, I'm like, what's your success rate in developing a successful leader? And they said, oh, it's like 65%. I don't even know how they measure it, but 65%. And I said, so that's good. You have 65% success rate training false identities how to be good leaders. That's what you're doing, because you don't even know what identity is. Imagine your success rate if they knew their identity and then you were teaching them about leadership. It would go off the charts. Just like in the police academy, if the first week course in the police academy is what's your identity. Everyone that doesn't belong in that vocation would drop out, and the ones that stayed would be the greatest gift you could give to a city. But we're always starting with at step 2 on everything. And identity is the primer that makes the expensive paint stick.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a joy. We could do this all day, but I want everyone to run out and grab Jamie's book. It's called Living Fearless, Exchanging the Lives of the World for the Liberating Truth of God. Like, I listened to this on Audible, which was great. You know, we're actually reading through it now with words on a page. But you guys also have a website with tons of resources called identityexchange.com. And before, Donna, you were telling me about this really awesome free class that you guys are offering. Would you mind explaining a little bit about that and who would benefit from it?
Yeah, we have all kinds of courses on our website and cohorts. We have something called the Identity Exchange Intensive, where you go through our foundational course called Becoming What You Believe in a cohort. Anyway, people can go there and read about it. But we just released a few months ago a series called Finding Hope in Depression. It's really about just finding hope, but we were sponsored to create it for Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's 21 episodes. Each episode is just about 10 or 15 minutes. So it's something easy to participate in, you know, in the morning when you're getting ready or whatever. And we've just gotten tons of feedback that it's been life-changing for people. And it basically, in a very simplified way, goes through all the processes that are in the book and in some of these courses. So we wanted to release it for free to give people just something new to work through. Yeah, so I hope you'll try it out. And if you like it, maybe join one of our cohorts or intensives, and join our mailing list, and you can see about new stuff. We have 3 new courses we're about to release.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, yeah, we're going to go check it out because I didn't know about it. But I highly recommend the book. It's just, your work, your ministry has really impacted our lives significantly, and really appreciate you coming on to share on this topic, and I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah,
so thank you
so much for having us. We enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for what you guys are doing too. Gosh, when I was reading your bio about how you guys started, I was like, oh, that's painful memory. I think we all started that way. So
I know. It's just
good stories, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like we all started out there. So thank you for what you're guiding people.
Yeah, so valuable.
It's just,
Thank you. Do you want some more Bob and Linda in your life? How about this?
Of course.
How would you like to hang out with us for 6 weeks and your small group or church?
And if you want to do that, just go to seedtime.com/true to find out more details, or send us a message, DM on Instagram @SeedTime, and let's chat.